Well, after last week's tragic episode, how do we follow it up with something completely different entirely? Hey guys, Kevin again for The Walking Dead, Season 7, Episode 2, The Well, and I was definitely looking forward to this episode overall, especially after last week's premiere, but at the same time, I was really scared about this episode. I mean, judging based on how last week's episode went, I thought this looked like it was going to be the most tragic season yet. I thought we were going to get a death in every episode, and I really wasn't prepared for the way this episode was going to go, but surprisingly, this episode was completely different than last week. I mean, this was a much more hopeful, lighthearted episode that focused more on the characters, and I really liked it overall. I thought this was a really strong episode. Nowhere near as good as last week's, I definitely will say that, but I really did like the stuff we got in here. We got introduced to King Ezekiel tonight, and that's what most of this episode focused on, is the key relationship between Carol, Morgan, and King Ezekiel, and as well as getting into his character. But let's just get into this episode because I definitely do want to talk about it. I don't have a ton to say about it because not a ton happened in this episode. I mean, stuff did happen, but not really as substantial, definitely not as substantial as last week, but let's just get into it because I definitely do have stuff to talk about. I really do love the opening of this episode. We start off with Carol. She's on the back of a wagon being pulled by horses. Morgan's walking close by. She's really out of it. Carol wakes to a walker. We see walker trouble and Morgan fighting walkers. The men of the kingdom fight alongside him. She's seeing things and she's very scared. Carol staggers off the cart and into the woods because she's disoriented. She sees an old house and woman in the window waving. It turns into a walker, and there are walkers shambling nearby too. And as we know, Carol has gone through that very traumatic experience to the point where she wanted to commit suicide, as we know, last year. So she definitely is still very frantic and she's very much losing it, but you also see that she's really seeing these people as who they really were and not just as walkers, which is interesting to see because, yeah, every single one of these people at one point were walkers. Now they're walkers. She knows what she has to do, but at the same time, she can't help but feel bad for them. I feel like this, what she went through last season has really affected her in a way that hasn't before, but we see the men on horseback ride up. They kill them. They save her. Carol tries to take in what she's seeing. The men on horses have pikes, and Morgan's with them using his staff. She thinks that he killed a human, and one of the men says that they've been looking for them. Morgan then carves an arrow into the mailbox of the creepy house, puts up the flag, and Carol sleeps and Morgan sits by her bed. I was surprised that Morgan actually did kill, because we went through a whole season, as we know, with him saying, oh, I'm not going to kill, but it looks like he actually has decided to kill, so they're somewhere safe now. She wakes, asks how long she slept. Morgan says 2 days. She asks where they are. He puts her into a wheelchair, takes her for a ride to show her the community, and the rest of this episode is honestly kind of lighthearted. It really is. And when I say lighthearted, I don't mean like it was, a really nice episode. It was lighthearted in the sense that it wasn't nearly as dark as some of the other episodes have been. He says it'll be a week while she heals them. They can head back to Alexandria. He says this is a place is called the Kingdom. He wheels her around, says he's been helping them to pay back them helping Carol. She sees gardens and productivity. Carol asks what he told them about her. He says he just told the men what they need to know. That they got split up and he came looking for her. Morgan takes her to the theater inside the school buildings in the middle of the town. He tells her the leader's name is King Ezekiel. She's stunned. He says the guy does his own thing. She asks what that means. The tiger roars at Carol, who is shocked. Morgan says that he forgot to mention that Ezekiel has a tiger, and Shiva, that's the name of it, not Shiva, Shiva roars at her, and Ezekiel pets the creature, and I thought that was a great way to start the episode. It perfectly shows you that this can be a completely different episode than last week, and I really did love the way that started. So Morgan then wheels Carol closer, and Ezekiel tells Shiva that that's enough. He has an outrageous accent, and he calls Jerry a steward. Ezekiel speaks in almost Old English, which was really cool, actually. It very much felt like you were watching a Shakespeare play, and I really love what we got of Ezekiel in this episode. Everything with him I just found so interesting. He's a very different character than anyone we've had in The Walking Dead, but he's just as badass, and I really did love what we saw of him in this episode, and they really did take the time, I have to say, to establish his character, which is something that The Walking Dead doesn't do a ton, but that's one of the reasons why I really appreciate. A lot of people say The Walking Dead has turned into a kind of just like a shell of what it used to be. That's what I'm looking for. A shell of what it used to be. But I would disagree. I think episodes like this really do show that they do still care about the characters. There's just a lot of characters to establish, but I think they did a good job of establishing this character who is a main character now, and I really did get into what we got with him in this episode. He overall was really interesting, and he says Morgan is the friend of the realm, and they will consider Carol one shoe, and Ezekiel says it pleased him to see Carol up and about. The tiger then stalks around and lies down. He glares at Carol. Ezekiel asks why she has not spoken to the king and asks if she thinks that he's mad. He asks what she thinks, and Carol smiles, says she thinks that he's amazing. She says that Shiva's amazing too. Carol says she doesn't know what the hell is going on in the most wonderful way. So Ezekiel says, enjoy the fruits of our grandeur so long as she contributes. He says once she heals, she can contribute. He says drink from the well, refill the well, which is what this episode comes from, the well. So they offer Carol some fruit that Ezekiel says grow inside. Jerry says it's fruit time. They insist. Carol says pomegranates aren't her thing. Ezekiel says that they have guitars and a choir. She says she wishes she had brushed her hair before she met royalty. And she says, thank you, Your Majesty, and says it's her pleasure. So Ezekiel says, be well, and Morgan wheels her out. The tiger growls again, and I thought it was the perfect introduction to his character, because again, Carol's very thrown off. Carol then asks if Morgan is shitting her. She can't believe who she's actually seeing. She says this play is a circus and calls it playtime. She thinks there's no way that this can all be real. I mean, there's a tiger there. This guy is speaking in Old English. He has like really weird like dreadlock hair. There's no way that it's actually real. She feels that this is all just a joke. And Carol says that she can't be here. Morgan tries to calm her down. Carol says when no one is looking, she'll leave. Morgan says he won't leave her. She asks if he's going to tie her up like a wolf, and she says it's not up to him. Carol says she doesn't give a shit if he thinks he has a secret to life. Morgan says he doesn't have it, and Morgan says that he won't let her die out there. Carol says it doesn't matter. Morgan wheels her away. Some trucks then roar out of the kingdom. We see pigs eating a walker that's been tied up, and Morgan is taken with Ezekiel, Jerry, and others. They show him a herd of pigs and a walker tied up to lure them, and the guy in charge of the hunt says that he wanted their bellies full of rot, and he then Ezekiel then sends Diane for the truck, and they tell Ben he's up when Walker's stagger nearby. They tell him to use the machete, and now we get more into Ezekiel overall. So young Ben then tries to kill him but gets in the neck. Ezekiel kneels and puts his pike through its head. Ezekiel tells Ben next time. The guy in charge of the pigs tells Morgan that no one at home needs to know about this. The guy then nods and says none of it. So Morgan saves Ben, who panics when Walker appears. Ezekiel then tells the walkers may one day they release you from the curse, but for now they live free and faithful. They leave the hunt leader and they go in one truck while he goes in another. Morgan asks where they're going. Ezekiel says somewhere else. They return to the kingdom, and Ezekiel then asks Morgan about his staff skills. He says that a chess maker taught him, and he remarks that Morgan saved Ben with a single blow. Ezekiel says that Ben needs an adjustment and asks Morgan to train him, and I thought this was interesting overall, that we saw that Ezekiel, while he is the so-called king, he's not really experienced in the kind of stuff that Morgan is, and Ezekiel said he's not really, experienced in a kaido like Morgan is, and Ezekiel says that Ben has failed with blades and munitions, and says maybe he needs another course. So Morgan says he had to shoot to save Carol, and Ezekiel says that the staff didn't save him and asks again to help the boy live. He says please, and Morgan agrees. So Ezekiel says the kingdom is favored by his presence. Everyone is at work. The tiger sits enjoying the sun. A choir sings. Carol sits staring in her wheelchair. I mean, things are just great. It's really weird to see things so, fun. It's just not something we're used to. And out the window, she sees Morgan teaching Ben. She wheels herself outside. She steals a knife and some chocolate. She talks to someone folding clothes, and she's playing nice, you can definitely tell. I mean, she's definitely trying not to lose her shit. She's not really this happy, but the man says they have cobbler at every meal. She says they were eating possum out there. Carol's happy and flummoxed, which really she's not. She asks for a tissue. He walks off. She steals some clothes, and he happily watches Ben make progress with Morgan. Ben then asks Morgan about the book in the pack and asks if he can read it since he's read every book there, including one on HVAC, and Ezekiel tells Ben and Morgan to come with them to deal with matters of imports, and they tell Morgan to bring a gun too. They're at the site of the skinned pigs. Ezekiel says they slaughter them far away so the screams don't attract walkers. He says he keeps secrets from his people. He says that these are the burdens of leadership, and Two trucks then pull up, and it's saviors, and Ezekiel says that they always fulfill their obligations. The guy counts 8 pigs. The hunt leader says that they are well fed. Diane starts to whisper who the men are, but Morgan says that he knows exactly who they are, and one of the saviors and hassles the hunt leader, says they've been letting them off easily. The guy says that he might have that backwards. The kid then goes to hit him, and the hunt leader hits him hard. Everyone pulls guns. Ezekiel says to seize this, and Morgan doesn't like having a gun in his hand. As we know, Morgan doesn't really want to kill. He only kills when he has to. Like he said, he killed to save Carol, but in this case, he doesn't want the gun. And Ezekiel tells Richard to let the guy go, and he does. He says this is not what they do. The guy punches Richard in the face. Ezekiel tells Gavin to make him stop. He tells the guy to stop. He stops, flips Richard off, and Gavin reminds Ezekiel that next week is produce week and threatens him. We don't know what that means, but just produce week in general really does scare me, I have to say. I don't know what it means, but just in general, definitely that sounded pretty scary. So he says if they don't fill the list, Richard will go first. The attacker then mocks them as they drive away. Morgan says he knows who they are. Ezekiel says the man Morgan killed was actually one of them, we find out. So I thought that was a really good twist. We definitely knew something was up there. And Morgan asks if that's why he wanted him here. Ezekiel says the opposite. Back in the kingdom, Ben tells Dutch a kid to clean his plate before movie time, tells him to be in bed by 10. So the kid goes. Ben sits with Morgan, who says he's a good kid. Ben says it's hard to raise him, and Ezekiel will help. He says the king was tight with his father, who was a good fighter, one of the best. Morgan asks how it happened. Ben says a year ago, a group went to clear a building, and 8 men died. And we know that Morgan is very experienced in that. You know, one of Morgan's lines, a clear, as we know. So Ben says Ezekiel is more careful now, says he's keeping the deal with the saviors quiet because the people here want to fight, and he doesn't want to lose people. So essentially, Ezekiel is the king for keeping things peaceful. That is why the Alexandria safe zone is called the Alexandria safe zone, mainly because of Ezekiel. He's the one that's kept things so quiet. It's Rick and co who are really starting to stir things up, and Ben says he doesn't know what's right when Morgan asks him. Ben asks about the handwriting in the book about not killing. Morgan says he didn't write that, and Ben says he notices he only eats vegetables and seems to not want to kill. Morgan says no one can show him the way. He has to find it for himself, and Morgan says he thought he had it, but he's really fumbling. You know, he didn't think he had to kill, but now he's realizing that he didn't, want to kill, but now he's realizing he might actually have to kill. And it's something that's really starting to mess with him, and I like seeing that. We see basically Morgan says that he may change his mind. Ben invites him to movie night, but Morgan says he needs to talk to Carol. Morgan then goes to Carol's room, but she's gone. The bed is made, wheelchair there, but no Carol. So Carol picks some fruit, stows it in her bag. Ezekiel calls to her and lights a fare. He calls her fair maiden and tells her to have one. Ben is with him. He says the garden is his favorite place in the kingdom. It pleases him. She saw it before she left them suddenly, and Carol asks what good she is. So she plays dumb as if she doesn't know what's going on, but Ezekiel asks Jerry to leave them alone. He says he'll be in hollering range. Ezekiel says never bullshit a bullshitter. He drops the accent and says her sweet and innocent act is clever to get people to trust her, and it seems that we finally see the real side of Ezekiel. I mean, this is all a facade, really. He's putting this up to make it seem like he's a certain way, and he says he knows the gun she brought belonged to the Savior. She asks what he knows about them. He says more than he cares to, and Ezekiel says she won against them. Carol laughs, says by ending up here she sits. Carol says this place is a joke, and that's why she laughed, and Carol says out there it's real. She says she's been places she thought was safe. He says these people need the fairy tale, and Carol says he rules over everyone and gets his ass kissed, and that really is what he does. I mean, he seems to be this king of high stature, and everyone just bows down to him, and he doesn't really have any worries, but we see that's not really true. Ezekiel sits beside her, says people want someone to follow. He says it's human nature. That's why Rick has been followed so much all this time, because he's been a follower. So many people, I mean, he's been a leader, and there aren't many, there are so many followers, but Rick is that leader, and Ezekiel also is a leader, and Ezekiel says that there are stories about him being larger than life, and wrestling his tiger into submission in the wild, treat him like royalty. He says they needed someone to follow, so he acted the part. He's not actually who he says he is. He says he faked it till he made it. He says that he was a zookeeper, and we basically get this little bit of exposition, but necessary exposition. We need to know that something's up with Ezekiel, and I like this. He says that Sheba actually fell into a concrete moat, and her leg ripped open, and she was crying, and says that she was going to bleed out. He says he had to try. He says he tied his shirt onto her leg and saved her life. He says after that she never showed him even a tooth, and he says keeping a tiger isn't practical. She could yank the chain out of his hand, but she hasn't, and he says that she won't, and he says that he lost a lot like others. He went back to the zoo, and she was one of the last animals left, and he says that she was trapped and hungry, and she was alone and hungry like him was the last thing in the world that he loved. He says that she protected him and made him larger than life, then he made this place. And he says he did community theater and did a few kings on stage, which is why he acts so Shakespearean. He, in fact, was an actor. And he says his name really is Ezekiel. He says that part is real. He says cards on the table. He asks Carol to keep this between them. Carol says she doesn't care, do what he wants, but says that she wants to go. And he asks where. She says away. And you can tell that definitely Carol is trying not to admit what she's really done. And Ezekiel says he's sorry for what bad she's been through. He says there's too much bad out there and it's worse when she's alone. He says it's not all bad and can't be. He says life isn't like that. He says life is hope. He says there's heroism, grace, and love. And he says he hopes she's not walking away from life. Because as we know, again, Carol was kind of suicidal last year. And we definitely do see that here. So Ezekiel says he went overboard with good to make up for the bad, embrace the contradiction. He says maybe she can too. He says maybe she can go and not go, and Ezekiel says he can help if she lets him. She asks why he cares, and he says it makes him feel good. He says he'll have someone bring her stuff and meet her at the gate, and she can go and not go. He says that they'll see it's more bullshit, and she asks why he cares. He says it makes him feel good. He says he'll have someone bring her stuff and meet her. Oh, I just read this. So basically, Carol Morgan them ran horses by a cemetery. He asks if it's what she wants. Morgan says it should have been up to her, and he was wrong. They approach the rundown horses they were near before. They get off the horses. Morgan helps her down. He hands her a pack. She pats the horse. She says she might regret all the time she tried to stab him, because again, we know there was a lot of clashing between these two. And Morgan says she's his favorite person he ever knocked out. He tells her to take care. She grabs up a staff. She says she's always watching, always ready, and Morgan gets back on the horse. He grabs the reins of the others. He takes the staff and goes. Carol then opens the gate, goes in the yard of the creepy house. Morgan puts the red flag on the mailbox down. The walker's out the window, and she goes inside, and she kills it. She actually kills it. She buries in the cemetery out front. She starts a fire. It started when there's a knock at the door. It's Ezekiel with Shiva. He offers her a pomegranate. She stares at him, then smiles a little smile, and basically gives you hope that she might actually agree for Ezekiel to help her. We don't know what's going to happen there, but that is the way the episode ends. Really good stuff overall. Let's get in this episode, because I don't have a ton to say, but I definitely do have predictions for where this is going to go. So, a bit of a slower episode, but a necessary one. I think after the events of last week and everything that happened, we kind of needed a break from all the chaos, and I like that we got that here. I really am loving this character of Ezekiel, this guy who's putting up a facade. He seems like he's the most powerful person in the room, when in reality, he's doing this for fulfillment, essentially. He's doing this for fulfillment. He's doing this to make everyone feel better, and if he wasn't doing this, he'd probably be just as broken of a soul, and I like the way that he wants to help Carol. The question is, does Carol really want his help? I don't really know. We'll have to see. I mean, we'll have to see really where that's going to go. I'm looking forward to seeing these two interact, definitely. I like their interaction so far, and I like the way that he's there to help Carol. I thought that he was going to be the one to save everyone from Negan, which I think he is going to be, but for right now, he's going to help Carol get back on the right track, and I like seeing that, definitely. I think that definitely is interesting, and Carol still needs to open up to him. Does she really want to, though? I don't really know. I mean, I think he knows that there's something up with her, but the question is, does she really want to open up to him? We'll have to see. I think that's going to be very interesting. And then Morgan as well. Morgan's kind of at a crossroad too. You know, he doesn't want to kill, but he's realizing he has to, and how is Ezekiel going to help him with that? And I feel like Ezekiel is going to come out to, you know, Morgan eventually. He's going to let Morgan know, look, this isn't really who I am. And it seems like he does that for people who he feels, you know, are just as broken as him and who need some assistance. And I really do like where all this is headed. I like seeing that Ezekiel, you know, his name really is Ezekiel, and that is the only thing that's really real. I really do love where this is all headed. I think their whole relationship is very interesting. And I like where Carol and Morgan are right now. I like that these two are genuinely allies. You know, I liked them clashing last year, but I like them more as this. I like them more as allies who both are going through the same problems, but can both rely on each other. I like the way that's going. We'll have to see where all of that's going to go. But it looks like next week we're going to have a Daryl Cell-centric episode, which is probably going to be really hard to watch, and we'll have to see. But I'm very happy for this episode. Let me know what you guys thought of this episode overall. I don't have a ton to say about it, as I said, because this wasn't a huge episode. It was definitely more of a slower episode with us finding more about Ezekiel, but I like what we got of him. The actor who plays him, I think, is really good, really well cast. I'm looking forward to seeing really where he's going to go. And is he going to be someone who can beat Negan? We know that he is a leader, but is he a leader enough that he can beat Negan? We don't really know. But something I really like about Ezekiel in general is that he does provide hope. This is someone who feels that love is still around, heroism is still around. His relationship with Shiva, even though it is an animal, it is genuine compassion. He generally cares about that tiger. That tiger gives him this purpose, and I really do love that. There are very few characters that are like that. Many of the characters in The Walking Dead are kind of becoming like Walking Dead because that's just kind of the way it's going to go after a while, but Ezekiel is one of the few that exudes positivity, and there's many few that do that, and I feel like he really is going to help Rick and the group with that, especially for a group that feels so hopeless and feels like they have no way out of this. If Ezekiel is going to come in to help them, which I feel he is eventually going to do, I mean, he is the main character after all, I definitely feel he is going to help them, and he probably is going to turn things around. I don't know how. I don't think it's going to be for Negan. I think he's going to try to turn things around for Alexandria, but things are going well for Alexandria right now, but based on the way Morgan and Carol are, definitely, I think he's definitely going to help them with that overall. We'll have to see where that's really going to go, though. But that's in my review. Hope you guys enjoyed them. You guys thought this episode overall. Loved your thoughts on it. We'll see you guys in my next, which will be for tonight's episode of Westworld, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.